New James Gunn comic book flick. What a blessed time. Are you stoked? Cause I'm stoked. I love goofy, self-aware movies. I really enjoy movies that blend like over-the-top stylized violence with comedy, and those are both areas that I know James Gunn can crush. And overall, I think he did. I don't remember the last time I laughed out loud that much at a movie. There was just a lot of great humor, a lot of really fun and creative fight scenes. I'm surprised that Warner let him get away with some of the stuff he pulled, even with the R rating. This is absolutely the brutal summer blockbuster that we all deserve. Which brings us to today's very convenient sponsor, HBO Max. That's right, now it's my turn to promote some of the amazing titles that you can stream on HBO Max right now. And since I was already so excited for the Suicide Squad, this seemed like the perfect partnership because Suicide Squad is available to stream on HBO Max right now, as well as a wealth of other DC titles. I've been in the process of moving and I'm having a great time revisiting some of my favorite DC adaptations like the futuristic Batman Beyond, the classic Batman the Animated Series where Harley Quinn was introduced, Teen Titans, Static Shock, and a bunch of other great titles while setting up my new place. I've wanted to dive into some of my childhood favorites for a throwback series, so HBO Max is going to be a great resource in that department. There's just something so comforting about revisiting those childhood classics when you're stressed, and these shows have absolutely stood the test of time from those Saturday cartoon days to now. And it's not just the classics. I finally started watching Doom Patrol, which is just so up my alley in terms of comic book adaptations that I'm mad at myself for taking this long to watch it. HBO Max also has all my favorite DC-related movies like Mask of the Phantasm, the Nolan favorites Batman Begins and The Dark Knight that changed the superhero genre entirely, and things from outside that direct DC umbrella like V for Vendetta and Constantine. I also had a great time rewatching Margot Robbie tear it up as Harley Quinn in Birds of Prey in preparation for this new Suicide Squad movie. So if you're interested in taking advantage of all the amazing DC titles and everything else available on HBO Max, make sure to click the link in the description below. Now just to clarify, they didn't pay me to review this movie or pay me to be positive about it. I was already making this video when I got this sponsor opportunity. And if I ended up hating this movie, I just finally would have done my Batman Beyond throwback video. Or one on Doom Patrol because I am having a delightful time. As always, you can expect me to be honest here. My opinions may not align with yours, but I'm not gonna lie about how I felt about something. If anything, my biases are gonna fall more towards being a fan of over-the-top stylized violence mixed with comedy and an ensemble cast of outcasts being directed by James Gunn. I'm a sucker for it. But just before going into it, know that this movie has earned its R rating in every conceivable way. In Canada, I think it's 14A in a lot of places, but don't be shocked by the things that you see on screen. The MPAA warning is very honest in what it includes, so read that before you take your children to see this. They really let Gunn be himself with this movie. It doesn't always come together super clean, but it is loaded with heart, charisma, spirit, and juggles in that intense violence with some genuine feel-good moments in a way that no one does quite like James Gunn. And as I've been doing lately with these theatrical/streamed releases, we're gonna start off with some no-spoiler thoughts, then go into some light spoilers with stuff that you could get from the trailers, then really just dive into some specific spoilers, so make sure to keep an eye on the timestamps down below, but I will make it very obvious when I'm talking, when I'm gonna be kind of like jumping into different areas. So first thing to say about this movie is that it has the exact tone that it needs. This is a group of villains, some of the wackiest villains you could have, that are being offered time off their sentences in exchange for what are essentially suicide missions. The things you can't send the superheroes to deal with because they're not supposed to be on the books. You could play it super serious, but I don't think that's the best move when you have characters that don't necessarily perceive the world in a normal way, like Harley and Peacemaker around. So it's just better to steer into that wacky and have the characters in the movie be self-aware of that. What the fuck? Gunn also plays around with time in this, like there's some fun on-screen chapter markers, and then we'll kind of like jump back in time to show what another group of people were doing while other things were just happening instead of just jumping back and forth in the moment. It keeps things exciting and fresh and can make for some very fun reveals. The biggest problem this movie has is also one of the biggest problems in the first one, just not as bad. The scope of their mission as it goes into the conclusion is just too big. This movie is a hell of a lot more sensible and logical with it, but I still think the big bad could have been a little bit smaller. But for other people, that might have been a major highlight. The action itself is really fun. Like there's an entire fight scene that's shot focusing on Peacemaker's helmet, and we're just getting the fight through the reflection. They really commit to the repeat hits because it would take more than one to knock someone else, and if one hit is funny, 10 is funny There's one scene in particular where it feels like we almost get a little bit too sentimental for the moment. Like someone gives their backstory and it just feels like it got a little bit too emotion in the scope of everything else that was going on, and I feel like there might have been a better way to handle it, but maybe that's just a nitpick. We'll get into some specifics in a bit, but just know that as it spirals into its conclusion, it loses a little bit of its steam, but really pulls it around to close it out with that charm. This is kind of like a love story to the villains that might be a little bit more like anti-heroes. Overall, this movie was just so fun, and if you're at all interested in it or any of the individual characters, it's an absolute recommend. Like, Pete Davidson fans are definitely in for a real treat. But now let's lightly get into the movie. It'll still mostly just be set up and things that were very obviously shown in the trailer. And it's a weird thing because this movie doesn't feel like a sequel, but it also doesn't really feel like a reboot. It's almost how I imagine the X-Men movies, especially the more recent ones, because every single one doesn't seem to match the timeline of what would have just happened, but they're all like the same characters, so there's just some kind of continuity there, but it works. This movie doesn't waste any time explaining who Amanda Waller is. Very lightly has characters refer to what the suicide program is, but they really don't get into explaining it at all. Character backgrounds are either completely absent or just lightly gone over as the movie progresses to various levels of success. And it really doesn't have much of what could be considered an intro in its intro. And I'm fine with that, and there's good reason for it too. It kicks off with her going to get Savant and putting together that team. And then in much like the first one with Deadshot, Bloodsport is motivated to join up because Waller is threatening to have his 16-year-old daughter tried as an adult for shoplifting.
I care that you got caught for stealing something as stupid as a TV watch!
And implies she'd likely be killed in prison. And horrifies everyone. So Waller is like really evil in this. Like, I haven't watched the first one since it came out, but I don't remember her being this sinister. She was definitely a degree of sinister, but this seems like a whole other level. But it works. Sometimes the only difference between the goodies and the baddies is the job title. But we're pretty quickly diving into this mission. Like, the first 15 minutes of this movie are pretty wild. It kind of feels like a climax of a completely different Suicide Squad movie. And we've got all the wacky cast. Well, it mostly seems pretty normal until you hit Weasel.
Yo, is this a dog?
What? Oh my god, is it a werewolf?
Yo, they turned me into a werewolf?
Yeah, he looks like he'd be this dude's best friend. So we don't know exactly what's going on with this mission yet, just that they're trying to sneak onto this beach and things pretty quickly go off the rails. Eventually we get looped into what's going on. Turns out they're heading to a country that's recently experienced a coup to destroy every trace of something known as Project Starfish. And as is made pretty obvious in the trailer, there's like one central group that we're following around more in this movie that's comprised of Harley, Bloodsport, Nanawe or King Shark, Polka Dot Man, Ratcatcher 2, and Peacemaker.
I cherish peace with all my heart. I don't care how many men, women, and children I need to kill to get it.
And I think we finally found the role for John Cena to shine in. I always felt like he was somewhere in between The Rock, who never really switches up what he does, but has all that charisma to back up that star power so no one really cares, and Dave Bautista, who does some like very strong, deep roles in like other major blockbuster projects that it just works. And Cena just always felt like he was somewhere in the middle where he couldn't hit the full charisma levels of The Rock, and he wasn't able or wasn't doing the deeper roles that Bautista was pulling off. But this level of liberty and peace, even if he has to kill to achieve it, is like the perfect level for John Cena's acting. Like, I'm really glad we're getting more Peacemaker stuff because he sold it so well. Because he and Bloodsport basically do the same thing. It's just that he's disgusted that Bloodsport does it for money because he murders for peace. Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn is always a highlight. I think she does such a fantastic job with the role that I want to see her do it for years to come. Please give her a Gotham City Sirens movie, and please introduce Poison Ivy. Specifically, please give me Poison Ivy and Harley. Idris Elba was great as Bloodsport, and Nanawe is adorable even as he's eating people whole.
And?
Yes, that is your hand, Nanawe. Very good.
And even when he tries to eat his own teammates. Polka Dot Man was hilarious, and Ratcatcher 2 is kind of like the heartwarming survival criminal. And her central rat, Sebastian, is a character in his own right. I love him. I would die for Sebastian.
I'm not shaking the rat's hand.
He's offering you a pretty leaf to show you it means no harm.
Why the f*** would I want to leave?
Bloodsport doesn't like Sebastian. Then Rick Flag. He's fine. He's like the golden boy of the darkest military ops. Overall, great group dynamic as they're trying to infiltrate this Project Starfish, which is gonna bring us into Spoiler Town. So if you don't want to know anything about this movie, you should probably hop off now. Thankfully, I don't think the enjoyability of this movie can be ruined with like little spoilers, but still, fair warning. So in terms of impactful spoilers, I feel like they actually happen very early on in this movie. It's got a classic bait and switch that's actually pretty obvious if you've been paying attention to the trailers, which a lot of people apparently were, but not everybody watches trailers like that. But as mentioned, the A-Team goes to storm the beach and Weasel can't swim. Blackguard tries to sell them out and gets his face blown off. See what I mean, Pete Davidson fans? Real treat. So it's an all-out bloodfest from here, and you think, TDK. TDK is here to save the day.
TDK is the detachable kid?
By annoying the enemy. Basically results in a bloodbath where Harley and Rick are taken captive, and it's best just not to ask about anyone else.
I really pressed the button hard.
So that's where it cuts back to Team 2. We find out that Polka Dot Man is a product of his mother's experimentation to make superheroes, and now he sees her everywhere. Bloodsport once put Superman into the ICU. And the only reveal that felt awkward was rat catchers. When they're on the bus, Bloodsport ends up asking what's up with the rats, and she explains that her drug-addicted father came up with the technology to control them. And it just feels a little bit too emotional in the moment, but it has a nice payoff later. Like, I just don't know what it was about the scene. It just felt awkward to me. Because then it just led into a story about why Bloodsport hates rats, and I just feel like the average person doesn't need a reason to hate rats.
Bloodsport's got a rat phobia.
I'm an assassin! Why would I share my liabilities?
Her father was played by Taika Waititi though, so that was fun. Which is also where we get a little bit more background on the mission. They need to break into this research facility known as Jotunheim, which is in Corto Maltese because there was a coup to overthrow the ruling family and the new president is very anti-American. And since Project Starfish is apparently extraterrestrial in nature, they want it destroyed to prevent it from being used against Americans. So they need to track down the thinker who's been conducting the experiments, use him to get into the facility, and blow it up. Easy peasy. But it's a Suicide Squad, so they're gonna mess things up. Like, there's this whole scene of them tearing through what they assume is a military station holding Flag captive, but it's actually a group of freedom fighters that would have been on their side.
Oh. Wow.
It's just so good. But they track down the thinker and manage to get him out with a little bit of difficulty. And if you're wondering where Harley is, well, she was specifically kidnapped for the president. Her rebellion in the face of American oppression is something that he and his people admire, so he wants to marry her. But then he starts talking about the beast in Jotunheim, something the Herrera family he assassinated used to maintain control and order over their people. Anyone who went against them and their families were brought to Jotunheim for experimentation or to be fed to the beast. Instead of shutting it down like Harley assumes he's gonna do, he's like, no, now it's my turn to feed my enemies to a beast. But Harley is a changed woman, and she said that next time she got a boyfriend, she'd be on the lookout for red flags.
And I would murder him.
Look, I'm just saying, no red flags with Poison Ivy. I'm sorry, I'll stop. And murder him she does, then kicks ass the whole way out the building. It's not quite as fun as the police station scene in Birds of Prey, but it's still pretty damn fun. And that's what I want from a Harley fight scene. Quirky, badass, and fun. But then it comes back to the gang trying to save her, and she just doesn't need it.
What are you guys doing?
We're here to save you.
Well, I can go back inside and you can still do it.
And that's where this movie really shines at its core. There's a lot of heart for a group of people who really just shouldn't give a damn. Considering the fact that saving Harley isn't at all part of the mission, but they're all game because they're just not bad people. Well, for the most part, jury's still out on Peacemaker. But now they have the Thinker, they have Harley, it's time to bust into Jotunheim. So they start planting the bombs all around the different floors.
God damn it, Nanawe. Quit being a playbaby.
Peacemaker.
But Peacemaker notices Rick sneaking off with the Thinker and goes after them, which is when they reach the level where all those experiments are happening, and it's pretty horrifying. See, Project Starfish is a literal starfish that launches a bunch of little starfishes out of its body that then latch onto people's faces and takes over them. Looking like Mermaid Man out of SpongeBob here. And the starfish is a hell of a lot bigger than it used to be. And the Thinker's been having a great time experimenting both on it and all the people that are afflicted by these facehuggers. So they're all rightfully horrified, and then the Thinker lets them know that the only reason why they're on this mission is to cover up the US's involvement in this project. And by project, I mean horrific experiments. Because it was American astronauts that found it and just chilled with it like idiots. And that's another prime example of what I mean when I say sometimes the only difference between a goodie and a baddie is the job title. Because Amanda Waller is the baddie. The US government and their involvement in these horrific experiments is the baddie. I know I posted about not being huge on aspects of the big bad, but I was literally just referring to the giant starfish. He's obviously not the actual villain, and the movie isn't remotely subtle about it.
Your government sent you here to cover up their part in it.
Wouldn't really do that, right?
You don't know half of what I would do.
But I actually feel bad for the giant starfish who was just trying to live his life floating in the stars. Not on board with the whole facehugger things, but I do feel bad that he's just been locked up and tortured for years, according to his meat puppets here. Should've just blasted him back into space or something, but I also don't like the idea of a floating space parasite, so yeah, maybe this was the best call. And Rick isn't remotely okay with this. He thought they were on a mission to help the world, but they just had to do it under the radar because they were in a recently destabilized country, not covering up scientific experiments conducted at the hand of the US government. But Peacemaker has one mission in life: making peace by any means necessary. And releasing information that implicates the United States in an extraterrestrial torture experiment would probably make things not peaceful. So he and Rick start a pretty big fight. This is where we get that really cool fight that's shot in the helmet. This is also where something goes wrong because the detonation charges go off way too early, which is where we cut back to the rest of the group where Polka Dot Man has accidentally set off all the charges because he was trying to kill the military because they managed to sneak in and shoot Milton.
Milton was still with us?
Who's Milton?
What?
I don't remember any Milton.
Either way, whole building is going down and Starfish is on the loose.
We've got a freaking kaiju up in this shit!
So obviously, a bunch of chaos here. Peacemaker is trying to kill anyone in his way to destroy the drive. Man, Rick can't catch a break in these movies, and the last one, his girlfriend turned into a witch. We get a solid callback to the conversation that Bloodsport and Peacemaker had earlier in the movie about smaller bullet sizes. But as they're trying to figure out how to take down this behemoth, Waller tells them to leave. As long as the records are destroyed, which they're not, because Bloodsport has them, their mission is done, so they can just let this thing destroy the country. But these baddies might be villains, but they're not bad people. So they go AWOL to try to figure out how to take it down. Bloodsport managed to give just enough of a shit. Even Waller's employees go rogue to prevent this disaster. Which makes sense. This is a massive alien that turns people into extensions of its mind by the hundreds. And you just want to let it roam around? And this is what I mean by too big. They are tasked with taking down a near impenetrable giant starfish, and only one of them has anything that can be considered immediately useful, and stuff like this kind of loses it for me. I know that James Gunn said that so many superhero movies have no stakes, which is true, but I don't think we immediately need to go to giant space starfish that mind controls people with facehugger starfish. There's gotta be something in between 0 to that 100. I really like that they're actually there to perform a cover-up mission and the dynamic of who the true villains are, but then it's like space kaiju. I'll admit it might just be because I'm not really a fan of big giant monster movies. I cap out at loving things like Jurassic Park, but even like the more recent Jurassic World movies with their insistence on doubling down on military dinosaurs just pisses me off. So if like that pisses me off, like I can only handle getting so much bigger. Like even when I lovingly watched Power Rangers as a child, every single episode I was like, oh, here we go, the little baddie got big. So maybe that's just a personal nitpick. Let me know what you guys thought about that. I just felt like it got a little bit too much, but I like the heart added here. Like other than Peacemaker, these people actually care about what's going on. They're horrified and they want to do what's right. I just find that there's a little bit of momentum lost here. So that brings us back to this thing where Harley has dove into its eye with a javelin that she got from Javelin, but we don't have that firepower from Polka Dot Man anymore. But you know what we do have a lot of? Rats. And they swarm their way up this thing's body, plunging into its eye and ultimately eating all the nerves going into its brains. And it's somehow beautiful as Harley's just floating in this eye jelly as the rats swim to their target. So they save the day, and Bloodsport's daughter is super proud of him for saving an entire country. But because they went AWOL, Bloodsport needs to use the information as leverage so that Amanda Waller won't kill them or put them back in jail or send his daughter to jail. If anything happens to them, information goes live instantly.
Look, I know Flag wanted to give the drive to the press, but we just saved the whole bloody city.
They had me so worried though, like Sebastian is running its way up this giant thing and I was like, oh my god, he's gonna die. But then he didn't, and then they show him at the end in the very last scene and I was like, oh god, please no, James Gunn, do not hurt this sweet precious little creature. You burned a bunch of birds, Savant killed another one with a ball within the first 2 minutes of the movie. Don't hurt Sebastian. But it's actually just a sweet and tender moment. And that's what it really comes down to. They want to be loved, to make connections and have purpose, an idea that comes up a few times with characters like Ratcatcher 2 and Peacemaker. Two very different sides of that coin, one of connection and love and the other of a more militant mantra that doesn't amount to anything in the end.
Peacemaker. What a joke.
because it's those genuine connections that bring the real purpose. And that's where this movie shines. That's something James Gunn has managed to explore a lot in his movies, and I'm so glad he managed to bring it here too. And good news, guys, Weasel isn't dead! So he's just gonna like wander around and kill some more kids, I guess.
He's a weasel. He's harmless. I mean, he's not harmless. He's killed 27 children.
And as I expected, an end credits scene. Waller had Peacemaker's body dragged from the rubble and rehabilitated so that they can set up for his own show, which I'm actually stoked for. Like, he's horrible and an asshole, but he's so fun to watch on screen, and John Cena is just having a blast with this character, and I always appreciate that. So overall, this movie was a blast. There was a couple of characters I would have liked to have seen make it out the other end, but I get why he takes advantage of some of these more abrupt kill-off moments. Like, obviously the second Polka Dot Man was happy and thinking of himself as a hero was the moment he had to be grounded. Literally. So I think if you're looking for a movie that's a ton of fun but doesn't get too deep while still packing in all that heart and a ton of comedy and laughs, I don't think you're gonna be disappointed. Again, I don't remember the last time I've had that much fun watching a movie, and that is just the kind of tone I was personally looking for from the Suicide Squad experience. So that is gonna do it for today's video. Let me know what you guys are thinking down below. Did you love this movie? Who was your favorite character? What did you like the most? Thank you all so much for watching. Thanks as always to the rest of my Patreon supporters. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, leave a like on the video if you're into that kind of thing. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. I'm mostly okay, and we'll catch you all later.